But if you see that somewhat horizontal tube on the top of the engine block, behind the horn, above the manifolds, that's called the water distribution tube. And what it does, it helps circulate water to the radiator. Now, unfortunately, over years, these things have a tendency to rust away. And I've seen some people braze them, solder them, patch them any way they can to keep them in service. Well, what I've done on my other cars is replace them with stainless steel metal, and I'm going to make a new one for this car here. I don't know if you can see, I mean, I've painted it, but it's pretty well pitted on the outside, and that is nothing to what it looks like on the inside. It is terrible. Right there, that's the temperature sensor. So I'll have to put a connection in for the temperature sensor. I'll have to make flanges. I've got tubing left over from the last one I made. I've got a piece of tube that's already bent to make the front of it. And I've got a piece of tube bent for the back of it. So last time I made this up, the horizontal piece, in 3 sections. And I welded it all together using TIG welding. This time I'm going to try it a little different, see if it works out a little simpler, and by using a brazing process. So that's my intent, and I'll show you what I've got to go through in order to get all the parts ready and hopefully have a successful project done here so I don't have to worry about that rupturing when I'm out driving around. I mean, fortunately, this cooling system is open to the atmosphere, so it doesn't have any pressure in it. So the only reason it would leak is just because of the fact that there's a failure because of rusting. All right, this is one of the original ones that I had taken off the car. I'm going to use this as a template, but as you look inside from the pictures, you can see that it's pretty crusty in there. And actually, this isn't the worst one of the bunch that I have replaced. So what I'm going to end up doing, I've got a piece to go from here all the way down. When we get to about this point here, it starts to slim down towards the back. So I'm going to have, where's my finger here? I'm going to end up with a joint here. This part here is pretty easy. Like I said, I already got that bent, so it's just a matter of cutting it to length. This here, I'm going to have to take a straight piece of pipe and taper it down to this dimension down here. I'm going to have to cut each one of these studs, or not studs, but tubes, and make them the right length, put a fish mouth in them, and braze them in place. Now the flanges here, I probably could reuse these, drill them out and reuse them, but I'm going to make new ones out of stainless steel, and I've got 1/4-inch plate that I'm going to machine, grind, and file this dimension, and then drill out holes. Here, I'm just going to take a piece of pipe, cut it on an angle, you can see. Cut it on an angle like this, flare it open so I can braze it in place. And then, whoops. For this piece here, what I'm going to do is put a stainless steel reducing bushing in there, or a coupling for that connection. So now we'll go over here and I'll show you the parts that I have presently. Now you can see the piece of stainless steel pipe with the bend in that I've got that I'm going to use, cut up. This part here is for on the end for the elbow. I'll cut that to the right length. Then I've got some 1/4 inch plate, and this is one of the ones that I have left over from the last time. And there's one of the tubes that I have left over from the last time that I made one. And then you can see the flat stock sitting here to make the flanges. Now, this piece of channel iron that these were resting on was a jig I made. And you can see that I've got holes drilled and tapped in the jig. And what I'm going to do is screw the flanges, or both the flanges, to the jig once I have them made. And that should line up everything so that it bolts very well up to the head on the engine. I mean, last time it worked out, really fine. I was really happy with the results. So hopefully I'll have the same luck this time. Show you later. I'm in the process of taking the plates that I'm going to make the flanges out of. And what I want to do is get all the sides parallel and perpendicular, square to each other, so that I can mark out my holes. And I'll do that by getting everything squared up and then drawing in a line from one corner to the opposite corner. And that should give me a very accurate location for my holes. And then I'll be able to take a center punch them, and then drill them out. So we gotta try to make them as accurate as possible, because we have a lot of studs in the head that these flanges have to match up to. So now I'll show you a little bit of my milling project here. And what I did not do is I turn it by hand, so I can turn it real slowly, being that it's stainless steel, it's awful hard to cut. And also, I'm not using a coolant, which I should be using on stainless and going at a very slow speed. But if I use the coolant, what would happen is that I'd get a lot of fumes. And due to the fact that the garage is connected directly to the house, fumes have a habit of moving into the house, and then my wife will get upset with me. So we're going to try to avoid doing that. I know it's going to be hard on the cutting tool, but it's one of those costs that I'm going to have to endure. I mean, the cutting tool is already in pretty rough shape, but we'll use it as long as we can, and then I'll switch it out for another one. All right, well, I've been working on my plates. I machined these let me put it up here. I've machined these two sides to be parallel. So now what I'm going to do is put it in the vise here. I'll do this side here first. Maybe I did do that side. I did do that side already. And I'm going to clamp it in. And machine it so that the opposite two sides will be parallel. So that'll give me right angles on all my corners, and then I'll be able to use those for reference on drawing my lines and laying out my holes. So I'm just going to cut enough off of here just to have a nice straight edge along here. This is basically a rough cut. I believe I cut that with a hacksaw. So it's not perfectly straight and smooth. So we're going to give it a whirl here. All right. Seemed like it cut all the way down the length of the edge, so I'll just check it here. And it looks consistent. Then what I'll do is I'll knock the burrs off, because we do have a little burring on it. I'll clean up the burrs on it, and then I'll measure it corner to corner to make sure that it's square. And the next thing after I get all these squared up will be to lay out my lines and my holes. All right, I have a plate here that I finished machining, so it turned out square, and now I'm going to lay out the holes for the flanges. Now, first thing I'm going to do, because I'm holding my iPad here, it's kind of difficult. So probably I'm going to take a magic marker and I'm going to blacken the whole surface. I'll show you that when I get this done here. Okay, now as you see, I've taken my magic marker, I blackened the surface, and I'm going to now scribe some lines to find the center of the rectangle. And then I'll center punch where my center hole is going to be, and also lay out my other holes for the stud to line up with the studs in the head of the engine. Now, as you can see, I've drawn an X across the rectangle, and those are the tools I use. I use a little pocket ruler for a straight edge, and then I use my scribe to scribe the line into the magic marker. Next thing I'm going to do is center punch the hole. As you can see, I've center punched the hole. There's my center punch, my hammer, and then what I did to lay out the other holes is I went over to my existing manifold and took the center measurements of the center of the other holes that go through the stud, and I found out the center distance between them was 1 inch and 9/16. So then what I did is I split that in half, and I ended up with 25/32. And then I set my calipers to the 25/32, and I put 1 point in the center in the center punch, and then I scribed a slight line across the lines on the diagonal. So that'll lay out my holes that I have to drill to fit the studs. So now I'm going to center punch those, and then I'm going to end up drilling all that out. And hopefully with sharp drills and taking my time, I'll come out with very accurate holes.